Well, we are at 3:30, and the German in me likes to start on time. So I am going to kick this off with introducing our moderator, Sydney Gladman, who is the Chief Scientific Officer at the Material Innovation Initiative. And I'm really thrilled not only to have Sydney on our team, because she is our expert in material science and engineering, but also to give her the opportunity to run this panel today. So I'll pass it off to you, Sydney. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, we're super excited to be here today. All right, so we have a lot of great panelists here today to talk about the innovation in the next-gen leather landscape. So first, I'm going to briefly introduce everyone, but they're going to do a much more detailed introduction to give you a bit broader information on their background. So we have Aniela Hoitink, the founder of MycoTex. We have Vicki von Holzhausen, the founder and CEO of von Holzhausen. We have Claudia Richardson, material innovation at Allbirds. And we have Christophe Cappon, the Chief Operation Officer at NUVI Releaf. So we're super excited. We've got people from kind of the brand side, the material innovation side, and a little bit of both. I think we're going to have a really great discussion today. First, I'll just have Aniela start off with introducing herself.
Yes, my name is Aniela Hoitink, and I'm the CEO of MycoTex. And we offer an all-in-one solution for brands. We're using an automated seamless production technology to create custom-fit products out of sustainable vegan textiles, and it's made from mycelium. But it is made in a different way than most companies are working currently. And the reason is that we are developing a manufacturing method that can be automized. And then by doing so, we can solve major issues in the fashion industry. So we can reduce cost, waste, and labor intensity of cutting and sewing operations. We can replace plastics and leathers with compostable materials. And we can improve the comfort and fit of fashion products. And so how do we do that? Our supply chain is based on 2 steps. The first step is that we grow biomass via liquid fermentation in a bioreactor. And the second step is that we apply this biomass robotically on affordable, configurable, and recyclable 3D molds. And by doing so, we can give you a freedom of design to create silhouettes and textures that were actually not possible before, and is also not possible with traditional manufacturing processes, whilst in the future also guaranteeing a perfect fit. So we consider ourselves as a holistic digital and biological solution for the full fashion supply chain. Hopefully, in the short term, already making it possible for brands to start local manufacturing beautiful home compostable garments.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that background. Next, I'll have Vicki introduce herself.
Great. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. So I'm Vicki, founder of von Holzhausen. We're a material innovation company focusing on plant-based leather alternatives. Our lab and material showroom is located here in Los Angeles. Our North Star is low carbon footprint, and we focus on creating formulations with high plant-based content, as well as high recycled content, with an emphasis on biodegradation. And our materials are very performance oriented. So we service all sorts of industries: fashion, shoes, furniture, automotive. My background is in automotive design. I spent 15 years in the automotive industry working for various OEMs. And so our company is particularly interested, and we have a expertise in this area. We focus on meeting automotive performance standards and aesthetic requirements. We also build our own collection of accessories and shoes, handbags, which we sell on our website. This has been an amazing way to prove out our materials early stage. And we spent years refining and testing our own materials through our collection and learning from manufacturing, our mills, our manufacturers, and also our customers. So finally, when we sort of allowed our materials to be sold to our clientele. We have very robust knowledge of a lot of the processes that they use. So if you'd like to see some of our materials in action, we also sell at Apple stores worldwide. So it's kind of like an easy way to find us.
That's awesome. Congrats. Well, I want to just a quick reminder, if you do want to post any questions for the panelists, make sure that you're in the correct spot. Stephanie JM just posted where the questions should be. So it should be under session and then chat. So just a reminder to everybody who's attending right now. All right, let's continue our introductions. Next, let's have Claudia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Richardson. I work on our futures team at Allbirds. We're a footwear and apparel company based here in San Francisco. And we, my team in materials focuses a lot on next-gen materials. So we're excited to talk about that today. I guess to frame up the way we think about it, at Allbirds, carbon is the clearest metric that we use to think about new materials. It's the clearest unlock for reversing climate change, and the best way that we have to measure our impact on the environment and to gauge our overall mission, which is to reverse climate change through better business. So since this is such a big focus for our company, my team has a really clear directive, and because we know that the lion's share of the company's carbon footprint comes from the materials that we choose. So it's a little bit of pressure on our team. So we work to reduce carbon in all areas: manufacturing, transportation, use, and end of life. But we know that raw materials make up the vast majority. Since the beginning of our company, which is about 6 years old now, we've intended to identify and lead on scalable natural materials. So we've focused our energy and investment on the power of nature, first on merino wool and tree fiber lyocell. And then in 2018, we introduced sweet foam, which is sugarcane-based, bio-based green EVA, which is ubiquitous in outsoles in athletic footwear. And since then, over 100 companies have sampled our material. So since the beginning of our journey, we've known that collaboration is the only way we can make a real difference, and accomplish more than just a brand can on its own. So for this topic on leather, we set out to find a new material that could act like leather to open up new styles, and we knew it had to be truly sustainable and scalable. So for our use of leather in the market, we surveyed the landscape and ultimately partnered with Natural Fiber Welding and Mirum on our plant leather line, which will come out in the market later this year. We found that to be the only option in the market that was scalable in the short term and didn't rely on plastic reinforcements, and truly celebrated nature, composed of natural rubber, vegetable oil, and other natural ingredients. So we were super focused on scalability, so it wasn't just a concept car. And excited to have a conversation today. And like I mentioned before, collaboration has been how we've won at making better things in a better way. So I'm excited to join today and talk about how we can collaborate on next-gen materials and leather.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claudia. All right, and I will then take it over to Christophe to introduce himself.
Hi, yes, my name is Christophe Cappon, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at NUVI Releaf. I began my NUVI journey about 5 years ago upon meeting the founder, Nina Roosler, with whom I collaborated to create a line of yoga accessories made from a Thai teak leaf leather that she was manufacturing there. And since then, the company has relocated to Germany, where we've established material production with EU-sourced raw materials. At the core of our innovation is a scalable, plastic-free, biodegradable material, which can be made from a range of raw materials, including but not limited to tobacco, marble, and chalk. In addition to being genuinely sustainable, NUVI Releaf material is also very durable. Although we've been at this for years and are still considered a startup, we're currently seeking financing to get our industrial scale production up and running within a year. So exciting times.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Well, let's dive into some interesting topics then. I'm going to go through each of our panelists and a few questions specific to them. I'm going to start with Claudia and her experience at Allbirds. As you mentioned, you guys are really founded on the principles of sustainable innovation as being kind of your North Star, your key market opportunity. And you already have experience partnering with next-gen leather innovators. So I wondered, if you could kind of offer up that experience from the brand side. What was unique or different about working with next-gen leather and new innovative materials compared to incumbent materials?
Yeah, I think so. Our brand's always been really focused on bringing new materials to the market. So it's the troubleshooting and getting into the nitty-gritty in our supply chain is something that we've had quite a bit of experience with. So we were lucky in that way. I think when working with any new material, you can't just drop it in and expect it to work as normal. So that's maybe the first step, is just acceptance. Understanding is going to take a strong partnership with our supply chain. So that's one area where we really focused was trusted suppliers, and as well as trusting and working with our partner Natural Fiber Welding on the actual material iteration and development, and going through multiple prototypes and partnering together to figure out what the best tests were. So I think being fortunate enough to have both partnerships both in the downstream and upstream parts of our supply chain was really unique. And then also, I think working with this new material, not just focusing on lab testing, but actually getting it onto, we make shoes, so getting onto people's feet has been really critical in having the confidence of bringing something to market that we feel great about.
That's awesome. Were there any specific, this is again learning for other brands who might be kind of foyering into these new materials, any specific bottlenecks that you saw, and how did you overcome those so that people could learn how to predict that kind of thing moving forward?
Yeah, I think some of the bottlenecks we saw were a lot of the testing that has come about in this area is a relic of, we tested a pleather material that we had, or somebody in the industry tested a pleather material that existed 30 years ago, and then that's been the kind of test against it. So a big unlock for us was really considering that and saying, okay, what does this material actually need to do? Could these tests be overcompensating for actual real life? So that was a big area, or maybe bottleneck of not meeting every single spec, but then questioning and having curiosity of, does it actually need to do that to really perform well and serve and delight the customer?
That's a really great point. I mean, it's something that I think we've been noticing as well, is this concept of we've over-engineered some of these materials for their applications, and maybe it's time to revisit what are the actual specs we need. So it's really interesting that you guys kind of identified that as a potential pathway to get some of these emerging materials to satisfy your needs. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Any other, kind of things that you could think of that a brand entering into this space, looking at next-gen leather, might want to know in order to make for a successful partnership? Otherwise, we'll move on.
I think partnership is really it. So it's really challenging to go it alone. So having partnership. This isn't specifically around our use of leather, but I think looking at sustainability as a pre-competitive space has been really important for us. So another project that I've been related to is around our partnership with Adidas. So partnering not on leather, but on just carbon footprint reduction in general. Thinking about things in a different way, or being open to new ways of working. Like, we worked with a competitor there, and we're able to combine our powers to create a super low carbon shoe. So I think maybe that's the general advice, is just thinking about things differently, and also looking at sustainability as pre-competitive and a space for collaboration in unique ways.
Awesome. Thank you, Claudia. Well, we got a little bit on the brand side. Now let's move over to somebody from the innovator side. Let's ask Aniela a few questions. So Aniela, you guys are working on mycelium-based materials. And as we know, this is a really popular area in the next-gen leather industry right now. By our accounting, we have over 10 different startups that are using mycelium in some capacity to create product. And I wondered, what do you see as what makes mycelium a really attractive material in the next-gen leather space?
For us, mycelium was giving design options, actually. My background is a fashion designer, and I've been working for many companies, Tommy Hilfiger being the most famous one. And I realized that not a lot of innovation was happening. So after 10 years, I started designing the same things all over again. And that's when I started looking outside the fashion industry towards other industries, what was happening. I tried a lot, and mycelium was actually the first material that I thought that could have opportunities to be shaped in 3D. And for me, this was the main thing to start working with mycelium, not because it is a material, but because I could directly shape it in 3D. And my personal desire, and this is something that I've been working on for the past 20 years, is to find a solution for customization on mass production level. And for me, that was the holy grail. And while working with mycelium, I discovered that actually it is, you can form it in a shape and it stays in that shape. And that's, when I started exploring by first actually designing with the material, understanding what would be the design opportunities, and then going back to the drawing board. Okay, so now I have all these ideas. How can I make a material that I could actually sell to the companies that I've been working for? And that's basically, why I fell in love with that material.
Wonderful. And you already mentioned this in your introduction, what kind of makes your mycelium leather unique. You have this liquid fermentation process and this molding capability. I was wondering if you could talk more about that, how it kind of differentiates from the typical mycelium leather we've seen from other innovators. What do you think sets you apart?
Well, I mean, for one thing, the growing method, and without going too much into technical issues, what you see of the larger companies, I mean, Ecovative is already here. They are growing via a solid state fermentation, so they're growing in flat sheets basically, and we are growing in large fats. So our material is growing in a kind of a slurry which contains minerals and sugars, and so the outcome of that is a slurry and not solid sheets. And what you see also that some other companies who are also using liquid fermentation is that they are also transforming it into sheets. And this is very understandable because this then directly fits into the conventional industry. I loved how Claudia mentioned that it seems so easy, but to put it directly in the supply chain, it is not that easy because you have to adjust the machines. A company needs to stop their production in order to learn about this new material. And my background is fashion. I have also a technical education on how to set up a factory. And I thought, we can do this differently because we have all this biotech, and then we are still putting it in the supply chain that is known to be, polluting, that has way too much production waste. And so for us, it was really a matter of, how do we get from A to B very quickly? And that's just by working with the liquid. And then when working with the liquid around the molds, we are directly solving another issue because then we can start working with automation and using robots. And right now people are looking into robotization of the supply chain, but textiles are flexible and stretchable, and the robot cannot handle that. And so by working directly from a slurry, we are actually solving that issue directly, because then the robot only needs to handle the material, the mold, which is rigid. And so you're really starting designing differently as well. So yeah, there's a huge difference between what we do and what others are doing.
Awesome, thank you. And I know this is a question that a lot of innovators are getting these days, but I think it's important for a lot of our stakeholders to understand. at the stage that you and other innovators are at, what do you think is necessary for you to get to full commercial scale production? What is it that you need from other stakeholders, from the growth of your company to get there? Because right now I think we're really we have lots of demand and not enough supply yet. How do we kind of overcome that? What do you think?
In our case, we would need collaborations with brands. We are quite far in scaling up. We are working with a machine manufacturing partner who already has a robotic process that we are adapting to work with our method. Also in liquid fermentation, we are, we are 2 steps ahead of industrial scale. So next year we can start producing pilot collections. And, in order to produce them, we need brands that want to collaborate with us and that can show commitment. But we are also looking for brands that understand the innovative side and the 3D options that we are giving them. Ideally, we are looking for brands that really want to also go to that next step by really changing, looking differently at the supply chain.
That's really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's move over to another innovator in this space. We're going to look at NUVI Releaf and talk to Christophe. So you mentioned in your introduction that you have a pretty unique approach with some of the inputs that you're putting into your leather formulation, materials like chalk, marble, and tobacco leaf. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how you identified kind of these raw input sources that you chose to use for your formulation.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It's definitely been a journey or an organic process in which one discovery has led to the next. In fact, I think it's actually the perfect example of white space innovation and going into like new, unforeseen, uncharted territory, right? But I guess to understand that, let me kind of back it up a little bit. So we kicked off like the NUVI next gen material journey about 6 years ago using these teak leaves from Thailand, right? Which, as it turned out, weren't quite as sustainable as we had hoped. So we adapted, right? We looked for raw materials which could be transparently sourced from the EU, which led us to the upcycled, undyed tobacco, which we're using today, and we're very happy with it. Actually, after all, it's an elegant historical plant with a lovely fragrance and, these beautiful shades of like leather-like colors. So that was great. But then we decided we wanted more versatile color palettes. So what better way to begin than with a blank canvas, which is why we ended up going for white champagne chalk, which we can dye with cradle to cradle certified pigments, of course. Just about any color in the world, okay? And then, so after having kind of bridged the gap between like the plant and the mineral sort of kingdoms, right? We just went kind of crazy and began just experimenting with anything we could get our hands on, and then ended up with this marble, which, as it turns out, has particularly interested designers within the interiors industry. Because here you have a precious raw material, which has always been identified as, being really hard. And yet through our process, it is transformed into something soft and flowing whilst retaining its natural beauty and characteristics. So yeah, it's been really interesting. And this is just the beginning.
Wonderful. You mentioned this a little bit with, you looking to expand into new colors was some of the reason that you looked at some of these inputs. How do you approach the customization process with clients? If they're coming with an ask, can you do everything? Do you find like a middle ground? What's that approach look like?
Well, okay, so it's the perfect follow-up question because obviously we offer like basic customizations such as surface, thickness, color. Even like more advanced tweaks like water resistance, increased flexibility. But for customers who really want to take it to the next level, I think what makes this truly unique is the fact that we offer the possibility of co-producing an exclusive material made from a completely unique raw material, be it plant or mineral. So that means, we're making material from something other than tobacco, marble, and chalk. And that's pretty special. For instance, we've produced material made from dolomite stone for an Austrian company, which for those of you, who don't know, is the Dolomites is a mountain range in Austria, right? Then we've got another customer asking for jade, right? And beyond that, I mean, who knows? Like maybe moon sand, bearing, of course, the carbon footprint. But in any case, the possibilities are truly endless.
That's great. That sounds really exciting. And one last question for you, and it's similar to what I asked Aniela, which is, I know you guys are in the process of scaling from pilot to commercial scale. What have the challenges that you've encountered in that process been? What should brands, investors, consumers, all these stakeholders know about this journey and how you're going to get to that scale?
Right. So, I mean, yeah. So at this moment, we're just, a scrappy little startup, banging out handmade samples from, a glorified garage. And to think that a year from now we'll be churning out rolls of, material at an industrial scale facility in Germany, it's all rather incredible. But anyways, when it comes to the challenges at hand, it really hasn't been what you might expect, or I think what maybe you're getting at. In fact, the answer for us is rather dull. It's just been a question of funding, and even that is on the cusp of getting solved. But I guess on that note, I mean, I could tell you what hasn't been our challenge, and as it is right now, it hasn't been making the leap to an industrial scale production. I mean, our chief production officer was the head honcho at major Daimler and Siemens production sites around the globe. So he really knows the stuff. For our R&D and ensuring that our material is going to be up to the industry's technical requirements, we've managed to rally the support of some of the best research institutes in Germany. And when it comes to building the actual machine, we're doing it in conjunction with a local leather machine manufacturer, thus utilizing their infrastructure and tried and tested technology. So, I mean, as far as all that is concerned, we're ready to rock. But I mean, obviously there will be more obstacles that will surface, but we have a solid team, and whatever comes up, I think we'll be able to handle it.
That's great. Well, what I'm hearing from that is that for other innovators in this space, it sounds like getting the right talent and the right connections to the right, people are what is going to really help you get that pilot to commercial scale production to be successful. Wonderful. So let's move on to Vicki. Vicki, you kind of have this interesting background, a little bit of the brand side, and then you're doing the material innovation side as well. With having your hands in both ends of the supply chain, how do you think that brands and material companies can work more effectively together, having seen both sides?
Yeah, it's a really interesting business model. It's like you running a restaurant and growing the crops and all the inputs for your food at the same time. So yeah, I think it's having our hands in both sides of the supply chain has been extremely valuable. So we're not just designing and producing with our eyes closed, but we're designing knowing our clients end use very intimately. So less waste and less guesswork has been super awesome, and it builds the whole sustainability story, right? So we're also closer to the end customer because they're constantly giving us feedback through our own collection and through our own website. We understand better how to market to them. We understand what their needs are. Early on when we were making sort of experimental batches of our first material, which is called Technic leather, it was a high recycled content material. Now we've transferred the top coat into a plant-based top coat, but our customer was giving us feedback was a batch felt too slippery, or did it feel to this or to that? And we've learned a lot with that sort of back and forth through our own channels that we were then able to pass along to our client. And our clients have really aligned with the same sort of needs that our accessories customer has. So yeah, I mean, super valuable information. There's also a deeper understanding of their journey, through material to manufacturing. What are the challenges that they face? what is the best way to edge paint our material? You know, is there issue with stitching, or is there issue with sort of like, if you heat it up in order to speed up the production process, are there issues they can face? We've actually had to deal with all of those through our own production processes as well.
That's great. And I wondered, you know, sometimes some of the things that we hear at MII from people who are working with new materials, that there's certain kind of issues and bottlenecks, things like high prices, high tariffs, batch to batch quality issues, or compatibility with your manufacturing. I wondered, you know, have you seen those issues, or if not, you know, how did you overcome some of those problems?
Yeah, I mean, for our own collection, we're a lot more flexible. We see our collection as sort of like the innovation lab prototype, right? Okay, so we build, you know, a case or a handbag or a shoe, and it's kind of like we're prototyping using our own materials. And so we're a lot more flexible with cost. But we also know, you know, from a material innovation perspective, we want to replace polyurethanes and leathers, right, with these more sustainable options. So cost is a huge piece that we're constantly working on. You know, we have different levels, and that's also an interesting part. Like, we create collections of materials because we're not tied to one exact formulation. Our expertise is top coat technology, but you can use a lot of different inputs for that technology in order to hit price targets for different customers. So, you know, we have customers that are very high-end luxury goods manufacturers, and then we have customers that are like mass market big box stores that are producing furniture. So we're able to sort of like work in a modular way and through our resins and our fiber inputs in order to sort of meet this perfect, you know, you're always trying to balance different things. So you're trying to balance cost, performance, and sustainability. So it's trying to meet those perfect requirements for each customer.
Yeah, which is pretty difficult, I can imagine.
So difficult, you know, because again, like all of you have expressed, like low carbon footprint is a great North Star. However, if, you know, if you can't, if the design team doesn't approve the aesthetic because it feels like rubbery or something, or if, you know, it doesn't meet the cost requirements, or if it's not scalable, then you're not able to sort of like move that industry or the client forward into these other materials. So it always has to be a balance. And it's been sort of my philosophy from the beginning, since we launched this company, that you always have to balance these things until you're able to sort of like produce in the background. We have our innovation lab in the background where we're trying to produce like the perfect material that can do everything all at once. But in the meantime, you're balancing, and, you know, for each client, you're balancing these very core, important attributes.
That's a really good point. Yeah, one of the things we always try to, you know, describe is that it's really progress towards perfection. You know,
Right,
it's possible
exactly.
to get to perfect right away. So, you know, making sure everybody understands the realistic things that are happening today, and that everyone is trying to meet the same goals, but it might take a little bit of time and effort to get there. Great. So I do have a question directly for Vicki, since we were just talking to you in the chat. They asked about your top coat technology, and if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, you know, it's like a little IP driven.
Of course.
We have, you know, we look at it from a perspective of scalability and using machinery that already exists in the world, so that we don't have to like invent and rebuild machines in order to get to the end result as quickly as possible. So we're using sort of like a traditional, you know, polyurethane machinery, but using very unique composition, like resin mixtures. And in our innovation lab, of course, we're looking for like this sort of perfect solution. And we'll be able to talk more about it as we grow. But I think, like all of you, IP is like super important and is a big differentiator. We're growing our innovation lab team. So if there's any really great chemists out there, come and find me, and we'd love to interview you. But I think, you know, I wish I could tell everybody everything. I think open source is something that is a piece of the puzzle. And I think that once things are scaled and industrialized and sort of like, you know, we're maybe that's a piece of it. Like being able to share the formula with the broader community is a piece of the strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, that kind of segues into a broader topic, which, I mean, there's been some comments in the chat about this, and I also had planned to talk about it, but kind of this whole concept of coatings and binders, right? And our current, incumbent materials being petrochemicals, things like polyurethane, which, to be fair, I'll just say I'm a polymer scientist. These are good materials. They have really good properties. There is a reason that they had become kind of the solution. It's not just because they're cheap, but they actually do give good performance. So trying to come up with that alternative that moves away from oil and gets us to a lower carbon, solution is a big challenge. And I wondered, I'm going to open it up to any of the panelists to discuss kind of their, perspective or, experience with moving away from polyurethane and what you've kind of done in that regard. And I'll call on someone if nobody responds.
Well, I don't mind starting this. We are actually already looking for many years for biodegradable and compostable coatings. And when I asked a couple of years ago, every one of the coating companies were looking at me like I was an idiot and why I was requesting something that no one needed. And luckily, over time, you see that change is happening and that more and more people are diving into that. But I do struggle with, finding the right coatings that are suitable for brands. And we've been collaborating with other brands, with other material innovators, trying to develop something for our liking. But then, unfortunately, a big company came and then we had to stop our little research because we were just two tiny startups wanting to develop a coating that was suitable for everyone. And unfortunately, this company wanted to have something for themselves, paid a lot of money, which obviously makes sense that you're not giving it away. But what I do notice is that there's not really a standard from the industry, meaning the brands. And therefore, there's also no incentive of coating companies to really start developing something. And even some of the most famous coating companies have not done any development over the past year. There's nothing new that we can test. And so, I mean, I understand that Vicki is really developing something themselves, because that's what I'm doing right now as well. And so then you get all these little companies developing something for themselves that is probably difficult to scale because, you have to do it in your own lab. So yeah, I really want to collaborate with brands, with other material companies in finding a coating and maybe putting more pressure on coating companies, chemical companies to start really diving into biodegradable, compostable coatings that are, having a good, meeting the qualities demands of the brands.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty great call to action. This is something that, we've said as well. We can't expect every innovator to independently solve this, with protecting their IP. It is going to be a really big challenge. So why don't we have more options that are commercially available for people to utilize? So you guys have other places where your IP can apply, your base substrates, your production process, et cetera. So why don't we have more on the coatings front? Let's see if we can get more people to work on this. And did any of our other panelists have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I can add my thoughts, like specifically as it pertains to the push for going like petrochemical free. Yeah, so I mean, petrochem and not only that, but like plastic free and biodegradable has been our mantra since like the very beginning of NUVI, and one that we never compromised on, despite the inherent challenges that come with that. Because after all, sneaking in a little bit of plastic, makes everything so much easier when it comes to achieving performance results. Because as you say, plastic fantastic, and it's in its own way, it's great. But we stuck to our guns, and it's taken more time. It's taken more R&D, but it's been totally worth it actually, because the demand for this kind of material is only going to grow. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that's a pretty good point. Yeah, every brand I think that we talk to is saying the same thing, right? They don't want petrochemicals, and they also are asking about end of life and biodegradation. So I think it's good that we're all on the same page, and I'm really excited to see all the innovation that's going to come out as a result of that demand.
But can I add to that? So we now have 3 companies, 3 material brands designing their own coating. So, and we heard already before the demand is exceeding the offer.
Yep.
But this is really postponing the offer, because now everyone has to design their own coating, which I think is really a pity. I prefer to put my my resources on developing the supply chain and the material rather than developing a coating as well, because that will take maybe 1-2 years longer before we have a decent product that can go onto the market.
Absolutely.
Claudia, how do you see that? Because you are a brand.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I guess we're talking about replacing petrochemicals, and plastic hasn't existed forever. There's been decades and decades of investment and research that have given us these fantastic plastics that we're trying to get away from. So I think it's like, from our perspective, it's really about investing in the right solution. So we've invested in our partner and worked with them, and fortunately had a really, I guess, tenacious partner in natural fiber welding and not used plastic coatings. But yeah, I think it's about investment and collaboration, and yeah, not just demanding something, but I guess having partnership and teamwork in that pursuit.
So they need to put their money where their mouth is. Is that what you're saying, Claudia? Not just ask, but be a part of getting that solution to come forward. And I'll say, we did publish a report earlier this year on brand engagements that we've seen in the space to date, and we are seeing that as a really emerging trend of direct financial or other types of partnerships where brands are really working to bring these materials to the market. So I would encourage other brands who are attending to take a look at that and be inspired by these new ways of working with suppliers, right? This isn't business as usual. And so I want to move on to one other quick question, and then we'll open up to a few of the questions that have been in the chat. So we just talked about, for polyurethane, there were 2 things, right? We want to get away from fossil fuels, from petrochemicals. But the other reason that people want to move away is that the end of life of polyurethane doesn't have a great strategy. It's not recyclable, it's not biodegradable or compostable. And I wondered, how everybody in this panel is working towards those solutions for an end of life that is appropriate, whether that's recycling, whether that's biodegradation or composting. The reason being is that the infrastructure right now for what you do with a material, like a shoe that's in a shoe or in your clothing, is a little bit limited. I live in Boston, and right now if I wanted to go recycle my textiles, it'd be really difficult to find a place to do so. And I know for a fact there'd be nowhere for me to take it to compost it. So I wondered, from you guys' perspective, how do we kind of solve this issue of making sure the materials have an end of life that we want, but fitting it into an actual path to get it there, right? Like, how does a consumer get it there? And I wondered if anybody had any experience or, perspectives there.
I could go really quick. I think from our perspective, it's absolutely, critical that we design for end of life, and worst case scenario is just throwing away the material, right? So for our materials, they're all designed to biodegrade in a landfill condition. What we've learned is that, and it's publicized everywhere, that less than 10% of anything gets recycled, which is really a shame because we all spend so much time separating our trash and trying to do the right thing. But the reality is that the infrastructure, unfortunately, sadly, doesn't exist. And I think that's another huge argument to move away from plastic products, petroleum-based products, because there is no plan for them. But, very, very high plant-based content will create biodegradation naturally. And then if there is any petroleum in the top coat because of potentially performance requirements, you have to design it so that it biodegrades quickly. And by quickly, I feel like it needs to be in a couple of months. And typically, vegan materials typical PU takes hundreds of years. I think that the data was like 450 years to biodegrade. It just doesn't. It lasts for generations. So yeah, for us, we see biodegradation as extremely important and necessary at this stage.
That's great. And thank you for those stats on the timing. I think that really puts things into perspective. Anybody else here have any comments on that issue?
I think for us, looking at end of life is, has to be a holistic conversation. So, like Vicki mentioned, we put all of this energy and resources into creating these amazing materials. And so extending the life of those materials is a huge driver and something that we're focused on. So we've piloted Rerun, which is our re-commerce plan. I know a lot of brands have been dabbling in that as well. And I think just having that as a holistic part of our commitment to sustainability, and that also creates a foundation of consumer touch points for end of life. So getting a customer into the habit of bringing something back then sets the table for future solutions that allow those to be recycled if they can't be resold into a program like our Rerun program.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, the buyback kind of concept, I think, is something that consumers could get on board. I mean, you get money back, right? Or you get a coupon, whatever it may be. There's an actual incentive to do something. So I think that is a really interesting strategy and something more that, of course, on the brand side, right? Material innovators have a little less play in this, but on the brand side is something we should all think about. And just, one other point, I think, that just to make us on this topic is that a lot of people think of biodegradation and durability as opposing concepts, that you can't make a durable material if it's going to be biodegradable. And my personal opinion is I don't think that's true. The conditions with which we're using a material during its life is very different from the conditions where it's expected to biodegrade. And I wondered if anybody else here on the panel could speak to that, as a concept of if they've heard from people that were wary of a biodegradable product, they thought it might be not durable.
We deal with that all the time because of our customer. We actually just posted this week, we did a big campaign about biodegradation. You can find it on our website, but we just posted that our material biodegrades per test method. I forget the ASTM, but whatever, 1155 or something like that. Anyways, per the test method, we biodegrade in less than 250 days. People freak out when they hear that. Then they think, okay, if I put, the handbag in my closet or in a hot car, will it disintegrate over time? You have to really be specific with the customer and the client that it is a very specific environment. And it's kind of like with composting. It has to be at a certain temperature. It has to be with a certain sort of microbial culture in that environment. So being very clear, because sustainability is also about longevity, right? We don't want our materials to biodegrade when they're in use. We want them to last as long as possible. So we use very clear communication about the environment and what has to exist within that environment in order for that to happen.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. Anybody else? I think somebody else was going to speak, but I'm not sure. Nope.
Well, for us, it's basically the same. We say that our material is compostable, and then I always explain basically the same as Vicki does, and then telling them that I hope that their closet is not having those circumstances, and so that they also think about, okay, my garment's in the closet. Hopefully, then they understand that it's a different environment, and that their closet is much better to protect your garments than some compost hope.
Right. Well, untreated cotton is also compostable, and I think everyone is pretty familiar with cotton as a relatively, durable material that's not going to degrade in your closet. So hopefully that, perception will change over time and people will understand. We've got some interesting discussion going on in the chat. One that was a specific question to Christophe, I thought I would point to you. Catherine asked, how long did it take you to develop a plastic-free coating?
Yeah. Well, I think what we're talking about right now is we've developed a plastic-free material. Our material right now, as we're sending out the samples, doesn't have the coating. We're working, like everybody else on the coatings, but our material is actually performing really well without the coating. So unless, people, for customers, unless our customers want to like machine wash it right now, it's actually doing fine without it. We're actually working with, like, when we're talking about coating, we're basically like, I think a primary reason is for like water resistance and humidity and moisture. I think that at least that's for what we're dealing with. And we're actually developing a line of like care products for our material. And the same because our material is actually very similar to leather, right? It has very similar properties. So in the same way that you apply, moisture to your material to keep it supple and healthy and water resistant, that's actually what we're working on. It's like just a basic first line all-rounder, defense mechanism, and that's basically been our solution, and it's actually going quite well. Yeah,
great. Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. It's not always a coating. It's kind of could be the base binder, the base material itself that can be designed with that intention. And I like the idea of, if you're already used to using leather care products, why not, use the same for alternative next gen leathers. So I think that's a great point. So there is a little bit of a discussion in here between multiple people in the chat about calling things leather if they haven't come from skins. And there's certain countries who have, ruled on that not being an appropriate terminology. Wondered if any of the participants here had experienced any thing like that in their talks. One thing that I can offer is that, at least in the food industry, we've seen some similar complaints for things like milk. So you guys can buy soy milk or oat milk or almond milk in the store today. And there were some lawsuits on whether you could call something milk if it didn't come from an animal. And I think it comes down to consumer confusion. It only will hold up if you think that the consumer is truly confused on the origins of the material, right? So if I say almond milk, people know that didn't come from a cow, it came from almonds, right? And it's pretty straightforward. So I think, the same thing is going to apply when you start talking about plant leather or mushroom leather, or whatever the terminology is that you choose to use, that people understand, okay, that didn't come from an animal, that came from somewhere else, and I understand what it means. But I wanted to see what, everybody else here, if they had any perspectives on that.
I'm looking for a lot of advice with this. So if anybody has another way to say what we're trying to say that people understand it. So again, we market to customers, consumers for our shoes or cases or whatever. And we, let's say, use the word vegan leather or plant-based leather in an ad. You just love to read those comments. No, it can't. And leather comes from a cow. You can't say that. And we see that all day long. But it's really hard to communicate this material. So you can call it a performance fabric. You can call it a next generation material. Very complicated for a customer to understand. Next gen alternative material. It's like, well, what is it exactly? So we've been really searching for the right, clearly understandable, marketable phrase. I'd love to hear everybody's, response to that.
Yeah, any of our other panelists to come across this issue?
We are not calling our material. Oh, sorry, you go.
No, you go.
Well, we're not calling our material leather, so we call it MycoTex for a reason, because we also don't want to be a leather replacement. We feel we are in between, fake leather, plastics, and leather, and we want to become a material of our own, and based on this new manufacturing method. And so for sure it will look different, because we are, you can create textures and designs that you can't do with other fabrics. So yeah, for us, I hope that that's working. But I understand how difficult it is if customers, they want to have a material that they understand. But yeah, what we have been doing when we launched the first material was 2016, and we've since then talked a lot about our material and trying to educate the audience, trying to educate brands like. We are not a leather replacement, because that means that we also have to follow the demands of leather replacements. And, going back to the initial discussion you had with Claudia, that she was questioning the specs and maybe we're over engineering this. Mm-hmm. And that's actually what we think. particularly having in mind, the life cycle of garments nowadays. We're not wearing them 40 years anymore. And so, why are we still looking for this design for a lifespan of 40 years? So, we do also believe in really setting new standards for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think there are some really unrealistic expectations that have been put out there. Not only should the material and product be very affordable and cheap, but last forever and have the highest technical specifications and be sustainable and et cetera, et cetera. And, it's just, we're trying to take the leap from 0 to 100. But it's going to be more like 0 to 25 and then 50 and then 75, so I think that, we're going to see a lot of change in the industry as a result. So I think that we can keep that conversation open on the topic of whether leather, is that terminology can be used. I think there's a lot that can be discussed. I see there's a few questions, one that was specific to me. Atisha, I think we'll connect offline about whether we think epoxy can replace PU. I don't think everyone here wants to hear that very technical discussion, but please message me, Atisha. On the other hand, I did see sort of a general question from Steve Bard. Is anyone able to produce thousands or hundreds of thousands of yards of durable vegan leather today? And I just wanted to highlight a couple things in that question, right? The word durable being in there, being very specific, I think, to say that maybe there are materials out there that are available but not durable. And second, the term vegan leather. So, we don't use the term vegan leather because it's not very specific as to the composition of the material. It just means no animals, but it doesn't tell you anything else. So that's why we choose next gen, because we want it to be clear that animals have been taken out of the equation, but also that we're moving to more sustainable formulations. So I'd say the answer is yes. There's a lot of people at this conference right now that I think can deliver on that MOQ. Some innovators are at different stages, but I would say, Steve, definitely check out, a lot of the people that are at this conference. I think you'll be excited to see that things are moving much more quickly than a lot of people realize. And panelists, if you had any comments on that. Vicki?
Oh yeah, we produce at that scale.
Well, there you go. So Steve, it seems like you need to talk to
Same
Vicki.
for us. So we're excited to be at that level now. Yeah. And we consider it to be durable and, have performed hours or hundreds of thousands of hours of testing. So needs durability. Yeah.
And I think Aniela and Christophe are just around the corner to getting to that as well. So I think it's really going to be, we're seeing the next stage, from early scale innovation to commercial scale is really happening right before our eyes. So it's been a really great panel. I've exhausted a lot of the questions I've had. I wanted to see if any of my panelists wanted to offer any additional thoughts before we leave today, maybe what they're most excited about from their perspective moving forward. And with that, we'll end the panel. So I'll let Christophe, what are you most excited about?
Well, I'm actually most excited about just, having been a part of this, and just it's really inspiring to just for everybody to come together and just for us to kind of check in with each other, bounce ideas, and exchange, and just to see that, like there is definitely something happening, definitely in the last couple of years, things have really picked up. And I think we're all exactly where we need to be, and it's looking really great. Yeah. So I look forward to the next one.
Great. Thank you, Christophe. Aniela, what about you?
Well, besides what Christophe is saying, we are super excited that within just 3 weeks, we will launch a product that will, for the first time, showcase, actually what am I telling when I'm talking about the manufacturing method based on biomaterials, which, by the way, we're starting with mycelium, but we hope to have a lot of the competitors, collaborative material developers starting to work with us. So we're excited to show that.
Wonderful. That sounds really exciting. Can't wait to see it. Claudia, what about you?
Yeah, again, so excited. We were talking in the chat before the rest of the folks joined, but excited that somebody said everybody's here, and it is true that this conversation has grown so big. And personally, I'm super excited about that we do have product coming to market later this year. I think being on the sidelines of this industry for a while, like having real product and market that we can touch and feel is super exciting and a huge leap of progress.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to go. I have an Allbirds store not far from me. I'm definitely going to be lining up for those new products. And Vicki, what about you? What are you excited about?
I feel like this is the place to be. We're super excited, in this space. It was much smaller 5 years ago. And I feel like, it's the moment for alternative materials.
I completely agree. It's really exciting to be at a place that is really hoping to see all of this explode. And, we track just, what is the innovation and investment science that's going into this space. And it's almost hard for us to keep track of how fast it's moving. So I really think, we have a lot more to see. I think next year there'll be a lot of updates. But I want to thank all the panelists for their time today. I think it was a really fruitful discussion. I believe we have a networking session following this. So if you want to chat with any of the panelists, head over to networking. You can also message them directly through the platform. And excited to have you guys continue to chat on this exciting topic. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.